Or where did Khadijah go? Khadijah? Oh, okay. Shalom, Assalamu alaikum, Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala Rasulillah, amma ba'd. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Sister Act podcast, which is a project of the American Muslim Institution. I'm Nessa Faryad, the founder of the Sister Act podcast and a co-host along with Rabbi Susan. As some of you may know, one of our other co-hosts, Pastor Michelle, and her family are mourning the death of her son Fitz, who passed away on Thursday due to a drowning accident. I would like for all of us to please take a moment of silence to pray for Fitz, Pastor Michelle, Delroy, and Anna, who are all mourning, and their older son, who I can't even imagine what they're going through right now. But as fellow humans and things that we're taught within our faith is to always be there for one another. So let's take a moment of silence, and then we will have Rabbi Susan do a prayer for them. Okay, Rabbi Susan.
Dear God, we ask your blessings, that you might bring your blessings upon Fitz's family and all those who love, continue to love him. We ask that you might spread your shelter of peace over them, that they might find and know the warmth and the love of community as we support them at this time. We ask that you give them strength and a sense of healing, that they might come to make sure and ensure that as they go through this world and they go through this life, that through their deeds and their actions, they will make sure and ensure that Fitz's memory will always be a blessing. And we ask, oh God, that you provide comfort to those who are in mourning, and that we also ask for strength for them, that they might rise up, continuing to do God's work in this world as they do so beautifully. And now that they will continue to do it in Fitz's name, we ask your blessing upon them. Amen.
Amen. And if you're wondering how to reach out to them, we will put some information out on our Facebook page later on today, and how you can send her a card and give your condolences to the family as well. So as you know, today we have an amazing panel of women of faith who are going to talk about their experience. So I'm going to introduce each of them one by one as we go. First, we have Khadijah Abdullah. She is the executive director of RAHMA. She's a Connecticut native and a graduate of Southern Connecticut State University. Khadijah founded RAHMA in 2012 as she recognized the need to provide HIV education in American Muslim communities. Khadijah experienced several encounters with Muslims living with HIV who expressed the hurt and pain they felt due to stigmatization and isolation within their own communities. As RAHMA's president, she has overseen and built crucial programs to tackle this issue in the Muslim community and other faith communities. Khadijah continues to look for innovative and powerful ways to make a greater impact and eliminate stigma, including evolving RAHMA to focus on HIV in all faith communities, founded National Faith HIV and AIDS Awareness Day, and most recently joined the movement to end female genital mutilation/cutting, FGM/C. We also have Kelly Whitehead. She's a rabbinical student at Hebrew Union College Jewish Institution of Religion. Kelly grew up in New York City before moving to Washington, D.C., where she worked in Jewish youth education. Kelly was a part of the Union for Reform Judaism, Juvie Nation, Jew of Color Fellowship, where she helped create and facilitate anti-racial biases trainings for Jewish youth professionals. And we also have Remaz Abdelgader. She is a Sudanese American community organizer and human rights activist who served her community and other marginalized groups for the last 7 years. Remaz currently is the co-founder of SAN, the Sudanese American for Nonviolent Demonstration, and a member leader of JMC, Justice for Muslim Collective, a grassroots organization focused on raising political consciousness and shifting narratives in the greater Washington, D.C. region. She holds a bachelor's in conflict analysis and resolution and a minor in pre-law immigration studies from George Mason University. I want to thank you ladies so much for coming on the show, which what I will, I'm hoping will be, and I know it will be, a great discussion, a great way of actually seeing what is actually going on in the community. And thank you so much for being here.
So I want to thank you as well for joining us and for being a part of this conversation, which is much bigger than the hour that we're going to spend together, but really is so important to what's happening in our world today, and being able to have these conversations and continue to have these conversations, not just as a one-time thing, is what we all know needs to happen in order for us all to move forward in a way that in which every voice is heard. And so I thank you for sharing your voices and your experiences with us today. We really, really, really appreciate it. And I hope in the process, just as I know Nessa and I, over the many weeks of sharing during this quarantine period, one of the things that's so wonderful about this podcast is the opportunity to learn from different experiences, and then not only to then move forward having those as part of our own experience, but also the relationships and the connections that we make with one another. And I hope that these are connections that will go well beyond our conversation today. So thank you in advance. And I'm going to jump right into really what we're all talking about right now, though it's not just the last days or weeks or months that have seen this type of violence and energy and oppression that's been going on for much longer than this current moment, but it feels different in this moment in many ways. So I'd like to ask each of you to share how the killings of Black men and women like Breonna Taylor, like Ahmad Arbery, like George Floyd, has affected your personal, emotional, and mental health. What are your fears? What are you thinking about and feeling during this particular moment? And let's start with Remaz.
Thank you guys for having me on your show. I think this is an important conversation that we're getting ready to have, and it's affected my mental health in varying ways. Initially I feel like it's very numbing. You don't really know how you're feeling, especially like as an activist or as someone that wants to be in the front lines and wants to act immediately. You're just focused on what can I do next to amplify the voice of what's currently happening, or to get this message across. So you're not really, thinking about your mental health. For me, it's a different process. I'm pretty sure for everyone, it's a different process as well. It's only starting to affect me as of Thursday of this past week. It's difficult to see, Black bodies slain on the ground. They resemble your father's body. They resemble your brothers, your husbands, and future children. So that in itself it's a reality check, like that this could have very much been, one of my own family members and or a loved one. So it's hard to grapple with, what's going on right now. And my mental health is not the best right now. And it's okay to say that, I'm just focused on doing the things that I must do, which is, eat and pray. And I took about 45 hours of leave from work, which I was saving for, a honeymoon, but that's not going to happen because of Corona anyways. So but I needed to take the leave because I couldn't focus on my work. I was just too angry. So that's kind of how I'm feeling.
Thank you. Let's go to Khadijah next, and then Kelly will follow up.
A wide range of emotion. I was just dealing with someone passing my family from COVID and dealing with that. And then I log on and see about Ahmad. I'm like, okay. And then Brianna Taylor, and then George Floyd. It was just too much. And I'm like, am I gonna be okay in my own home? Can I sleep in my own bed without getting shot? Can I jog without getting shot? Can I go to the store without getting shot? And this keeps happening over and over and over and over again. We can't take anymore. It's just too much. Like what, like, and I've seen all these protests happening, and you know, it's seeing all these people come across the world coming together to protest is a historical moment for sure. But what's gonna happen when the cameras turn off? Are you gonna go back to your regularly scheduled privileged lives? Or are you gonna keep continuing going forward trying to end racism in our community? I'm Black, my family is Black. I'm afraid, like my nephew, he's a teenager. Can he go outside and eat Skittles and drink iced tea without being worried about getting killed by somebody? You know, it's a lot to process. I had to take a break from social media for a couple of days just to think about this, and people were calling me and asking me how am I doing and checking on me, which is great, but it was just too much for me. I needed my space. I needed time to heal, to just understand what's going on, and say, this is happening again. It's happening with Eric Gardner. He couldn't breathe either, and he was killed. Trayvon Martin, you know, Philandra Pastos, all these different people that are being killed over and over and over again. And what is happening to stop this? And I mean, I've been to protests this year. This time I didn't go to protests, but I've been to protests in the past, and you know, you feel something, I mean, at a protest. But I just want to see results. I want to see solutions. I want to see people stepping up and having these conversations about this and putting it into it. I mean, we've been fighting this for years, but it still is happening. So for me, it's a lot for me to think about, a lot for me to digest, and I don't know how much more of it I can take, to be honest with you. So that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, thank you. I'm living abroad for now for another 2 weeks, and it's hard to feel distant and helpless in processing it all. I'm also privileged. I'm privileged to be light-skinned, and with these privileges, I still worry about the people I love. I worry about my Black family and friends and loved ones, that they can be injured and killed by the police as well. And I'm exhausted, and I've seen some white people that I know posted this tiredness that they're feeling, and this burnout, and try wearing that burnout every time we get a notification that someone's killed. Like these these 3 Black people that were just killed are not the first. This is not a unique example. Every time this comes on the news, it hurts more and more and more.
And I'm angry. I forgot to add that. I'm angry too. I'm very angry. I'm outraged. I have all these wide range, from being sad to outraged, to wanting to cry, to feeling emotional. It's a whole wide range of emotions, and I don't know how to put a tap on it or to handle them. But I am angry. I am upset. I'm outraged. I'm also sad. I'm emotional. I'm just dealing with all these different things because I am tired of people in our community being killed for no reason. There's no reason why you got to kill somebody by putting your knee, and they're crying for their mother. Like, come on. Like, every mother in this world heard him when he was crying for his mother. That, to me, that's intense. And that should never have happened. So I'm sorry, but I'm just, just a lot, so.
This is no apologies necessary. And let's just make that you know, the images are hard enough, and acknowledging that, you know, I mentioned three names. I don't want to say like 3 names at the beginning, but there are so many names. And these are only the names that get highlighted because there is media presence, or there's somebody. These are the ones that make news, but we know that it's a sampling, and I think, you know, I can't project what any of you are feeling. I know the rage, the outrage, and sadness and the wide swing of emotions. So I can only imagine I know what I'm experiencing, and I can only imagine for each of you in different ways and in your experiences, which we're going to talk to and speak to in a moment. So I want to thank you also for that, because the emotions you can't check those at the door, because we're talking about lives. And there's a saying in Judaism, and I know that it exists in Islam as well, that when you save a single life, it is as though you have saved an entire world. And when you destroy a single life, it's as though you've destroyed an entire world. And that's because all of the connections and all the family members, each person encompasses a world into and of themselves through those relationships. So we're talking about much more even than we're talking about an individual, and we're talking about a whole world. Before I go on to the next question, I just want to mention for those who are listening, or if you're watching on Facebook Live, that you can put questions you can ask questions on Facebook Live. You can just as a comment, and we'll get to those as well. And if you're on here, you can put them in the chat for our participants here. So I'd love if you would each give us some examples, share some examples of racist interactions or insults you faced throughout your life as a Black woman of faith. Again, we're jumping in to all of this because I think it's important for people to know and understand what the experience is, especially if it's not ours. And that's part of, as we have this conversation, we're going to get to the steps that we can all take and what we can do. But I think the first thing is even beginning to understand the experience. So I'd love to start with Kelly, and then Remaz, and then Khadijah.
Great. Almost all of my racist experiences have occurred in Jewish spaces, synagogues, organizations, conferences. I'm privileged to operate in the world as a lighter skinned mixed race woman, but in Jewish spaces, I'm often viewed as an outsider, despite being raised in the faith and being a rabbinical student devoting my life to Jewish practice. I don't have the emotional capacity right now to go into great detail of these experiences that I faced. I don't have it in me, and I do think I need to protect myself here. But I've been the subject of many microaggressions, which are indirect slights as a result of implicit bias, which is a result of systematic and institutionalized racism. Within my Jewish practice, I'm a member of the Reform movement, and am part of very progressive communities. And I look up to rabbis who are outspoken and arrested defending our social justice values. And these values are key components of our religion. We look forward to repairing the world and to speaking up to others. But in these same spaces, I'm tokenized. I'm confused for other Jews of color, even if we look nothing alike. I am confused as custodial staff, and not that that's a bad thing, but if you are the parent of a child that I teach, that's not okay. I've been told to get over cultural appropriation when I call it out or defend people, and I've been treated more harshly in my rabbinical school classes than my white classmates because of my gender and my race.
Yeah, I can echo kind of similar what Kelly said. There's, subtle forms of discrimination, and there's some that are, much more overt. There's micro and macro aggressions, and I faced them all. There were times in which, we navigate the spaces that we're in, and we know that something had just occurred that's not okay, right? But because sometimes you just want to pick your battles and you don't want to call them out. And I would also, say that, like, as someone who is, visibly Muslim, and someone that also sits at the intersectionality of being a Black woman, those kind of discriminations can be a lot more charged, right? I have too many to share, but I will give some examples. When I interned on the Hill, and as an intern, I was asked to escort a congressman's cousin to the House floor because it was during a swearing-in ceremony for the 115th Congress session, and I wanted to use the restroom. And I have a badge, so that in itself should make me a legitimate, individual in that space. And the police officers would not allow me to use the bathroom. And then I, went back upstairs and I found a staffer who was African American, who, I believe is well known. And I told him my experience, and he marched down with me to communicate with the police officer that this is an intern with a valid badge, so she should be able to use the bathroom. For some people, that may seem as an overt form of discrimination, but to me, that's some of the subtle things I've experienced. I've had the cops called on me when I was in school. While I was using the bathroom, a white lady came to retrieve the coins from the pad dispensary and thought that I was homeless. So she called the cops, and the cops came into the bathroom, hands on their guns, and they saw me, and I was scared. I was startled because I was thinking it was hella early because I didn't have a car, but I wanted to be, the student that I was, and I wanted to work hard and make sure that I had a good GPA and secure a bright future for myself. So I would tell my dad, look, we'll go and pray together at the mosque, the early Fajr prayer, and then you drop me off at campus, and then I will, wait on campus. I got a job on campus and everything. So the cops came into the bathroom, and they scared me, and I scared them because I was just as scared. And they said, have you seen anybody homeless here? And I said, no, but should I be alarmed because you have your hand on your gun? And they were like, they didn't say anything. They left the bathroom, and then I packed my stuff and I went outside, and right outside the bathroom, they were waiting for me. And this is around 10 a.m. in the morning. And they said, can we please see some ID? And at that time, for me, I always assume the best in people. I always try to do that. And I said, sure, here's my ID. And they verified my identity. But then imagine the humiliation that occurs, or, when you have to hear your name being called on a radio comm, and then for the student office to verify a residency. And even after verifying where I lived, they wouldn't leave me alone. They stayed next to me, and I told them this is where I worked. I showed them the office. I worked at the Department of Sociology and Anthropology as a work study student. And then my supervisor had come, and they waited literally an hour until my supervisor came. And when I explained to my supervisor what had happened, like I mentioned earlier, for me, when something happens, I have all these emotions, but I'm still processing it. So I might not cry right away. So she started crying right away, and she was like, this is unacceptable. This is this is one of our best work study students we've ever had in our department. How dare you do this? So, I mean, these are the kind of the aggressions that happen. There's been so many more. I remember one time when I was fundraising for breast cancer, and I used to stay on campus for a lot longer. And again, I wasn't driving when I was a college student. So my dad would come and pick me up, and I was waiting for him on the curbside of campus. And this one car came by and tried to run me over. It was a white male in his car. And I'm not sure which one of my identities pissed him off the most in that moment, or made him feel so enraged, because as he attempted to take my life, he uttered and said, "This isn't Iraq, bitch." So this is, it's just so much. It's constantly being policed in any space. When you're trying to purchase an item, it's constantly feeling like you're a thief. You're constantly made to feel like, that you're invading any space. It's in our mosques. We haven't gotten a chance to talk about that, but I'm definitely going to talk about it later. It's in every space we exist in, as a Muslim, as a visibly Muslim Black woman. In every single space that I exist in, I have to learn how to navigate and just have a good day, because microaggressions I can always count on them being there. And that's just kind of what my experience has been.
I could tell some stories. We'll be here all day. I'm a dark-skinned woman, so even in the society, that's something that's looked down upon. So I've been experiencing this since I was a baby, since I was a kid, in Muslim and outside of Muslim spaces. And then when I wear a scarf, people think, oh, you're from a different country. Do you speak English? Yes, I speak English. I'm from America. My parents are converts. I have an Arabic name, but yes, I can speak English. And my mom, she wore niqab once when I was younger, and people said to her, "Hi, do you need something?" She was like, "Excuse me, I speak English." Something really slow, you don't understand what they're saying. And, she wasn't having that. But I mean, I've been called the N-word. I've been called Saddam Hussein's cousin. I've been told to go back to Africa or, you know, wherever that may be. But I mean, I've had some very clear, I mean, I've been followed by cops driving while Black. I've been stopped for no reason and interrogated by white cops. When I was in college, there was a drunk girl, you know, that was white that called me the N-word. And back then I was a very fiery person. I was ready to fight her. And my friends had to hold me back and all that kind of stuff. And I was just so upset, you know, like I come from a community where it's predominantly African-American. So all people look like me. So I went to college, went to UConn first in Connecticut. So I went to UConn. And for me, it was a cultural shock. People were from all over, and I just felt like, how can I settle in? And then I had the experiences on campus. And, you know, and then people were saying, oh, you know, you're ugly, you have, you know, the wide nose and the big lips and all this stuff. And it's like, whatever. Like for me growing up, I always felt as an ugly person because society will always tell if you have the lighter skin and like the skinnier noses and all this stuff. So I had a really low self-esteem as a child growing up. I mean, now I know I'm beautiful, so it doesn't matter. But when I was younger, I had a lot of issues, self-esteem. And even in my own African-American community, if you're lighter, you know, people are like, oh, I'm more, you know, I'm lighter, so, you know, I have more this, I can do that, and, you know, I can fit in more here or there. And they try to make themselves feel better about it. So, because they know they're exposing themselves to discrimination, racism. No matter how much color you have in your skin, you're always going to be Black. No matter how light you are, they know you're Black. So they feel better to talk to someone else who's darker, make themselves feel better and raise themselves up from their issue that they're having. And then in the Muslim community, I know we're going to talk about that more a little bit later, but I've had I always was taught that in Islam, there isn't any racism and we're all one. That's what we're taught. But the reality is there are people that are racist within every faith. And I've had really interesting experiences about that. You know, I've been called words like abid, which means slave. I've been called words in different languages that means like dark skin or Black person, like in a derogatory way. You know, so it's a lot. And I think we have a lot to dismantle in our communities, but it's not my job to do it. You guys need to have your own conversations about it. You need to address your own insecurities, your own racism, and your own privilege, and let people feel accepted in the community, because no Muslim is better than any other Muslim. No person is better than any other person. It's because you're fair and I'm not, is make you better than me. We all still bleed red. We're all still human. And, you know, but society sounds different. That's why we're being killed in the streets because of our skin color. I was told I'm a fake Muslim because I'm African-American and a convert. My family is converts, and they start off with Nation of Islam, so we're fake Muslims. They don't know anything about Islam. You know, I'm a Muslim than you. I mean, at least I'm not, you know, saying these negative things. I'm not, you know, being disrespectful like you're being. Like, I'm trying to be a good person. You tell me I'm not Muslim? Like, how are you going to tell somebody you're not Muslim? Only Allah can judge me, pretty much. So it's just all these different experiences I've experienced in my life. I'll go into more detail later on when we talk about, you know, within the faith. I worked in the Hill too, Remaz. I was intern there as well. And I, you know, had some experiences. Aren't you hot and all that? Aren't you hot too? We're all hot. It doesn't matter what we're wearing, we're all hot. So it's like, do you have an AC under your scarf? Seriously. You know, it's just all types of different things that people say to you and ask you, are you bald-headed? Because I respect I'm bald-headed. You took a shower with that on? It's just all types of people ask you and say to you when you are visibly Muslim. And I always didn't wear a scarf. So when I went to wear a scarf, oh, just a regular Black girl. Or wear a scarf, oh, where you from? You born here? You know, so it's just like, it kind of changes how people perceive you by what you wear. So to say about that right now.
Thank you, ladies, for being vulnerable with us and really getting deep down in actually what has happened to you throughout your life, because unless people hear it and unless people actually can imagine that happening, they don't know, right? And that's why we're here. We're here to let people know that these are the types of incidents that have happened in your life. And it, you know, it doesn't matter what faith you're from or where you're from. If you're Black, you're going to, you know, have people who are racist in your face throughout your life, and how Remaz says, like, I have to like figure out how I'm going to work throughout that space. And that's a lot of work. That's a lot of emotional work, and a human being should not have to go through that. And that's one of the other systemic problems we have in this country, is just the foundation of racism and how it's embedded into our everyday life, where it's made to keep the Black community grounded, where growth and movement is not, something that is promoted for that community. And you, Khadija, talked about faith groups, and yes, all of our faith groups condemn racism openly, right? There's so many ayahs of the Quran and hadiths of our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, but that doesn't mean that people of faith aren't racist. Somehow people feel that just because I am Muslim, that in Islam, does not allow racism, so how can I be racist, right? Even though I'm going to say something that's racist, but that doesn't mean I'm racist. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of conversation that we are supposed to have with people who are racist, and getting them to admit that they're racist, because they feel that because they're a person of faith, they're not racist. That's another problem, right? But how have you addressed, racist people within your faith groups, and, what have they said? How have you responded? What were the counteractions that you took? Did you notice people around you? What were they saying? And this kind of goes into a glimpse of what, people can expect when a person of color is put in that position, right? From faith people of your own faith, who you think that would never say such things to you, but they have said it, right? And we need to call them out. And I'm not, and Rabbi Susan is right there with me. We're not one of those to brush things under the rug and be complacent and be like, oh, well, everything's hunky-dory. We don't have that problem. No, we do. I hear it myself. I heard it growing up myself, and we'll talk about that too. So I'm gonna start with Khadija, and then we'll go to Kelly, and then Remaz.
Well, when I first had my experiences, I didn't say anything. I was just like shocked. I didn't know how to respond. It kind of happened like, that's like, oh, wait, what just happened? And by the time it passed over, I felt like I couldn't go back and address it. I mean, more now I'm very outspoken about how I feel about things, and I will say something to someone. But I remember when I first moved here in 2010, I was straight out of college, and I was new to the area. I didn't know anyone. And I come from a very small, close-knit community. So when I came here, I came to this huge, diverse community. I was like, oh my God, all these different people, different backgrounds, I was so excited. But then I went to the mosque, and when someone new comes to our mosque, they're like, oh, hey, like, I don't know you, how are you? I come to the mosque, and no one says hello. I mean, I'm not expecting a red carpet rolled out for me, no, but at least assalamu alaikum, like, something like that. And I felt people had their own cliques, and, I experienced subtle tones of racism in the space, and it was a really hard year for me. And when I would go home, and one night I just broke down in my room and like cried really hard. My mom came, she's like, what's going on? And I told her what was going on. I'm a very extroverted person, I like feed energy off people. So by me not being able to connect with people, and I didn't feel welcome in the space, it was really hard for me. My mom, bless her heart, she took things to her own hands. She reached out to the mosque and, asked about any youth things going on and things like that. But still, it was still disconnect. So I decided, I'm gonna start volunteering in the community. So I started volunteering. I met some amazing people. I volunteered with El Maghrib, which is an institute in Islamic relief, and met some amazing people. But I still experienced some racism. At that time, I was trying to, I was young at the age, but you get married and all that fun stuff. And I met someone, and well, actually, we'll go back a little bit first. When I was in college, I was the president of MSA, and there was someone as part of it that was South Asian descent, and he was interested. He had he liked me, right? And he went to say, oh, we should halal date and talk more, and I'm interested to get to know you more. And I was like, I don't halal date. So I told him, and I was like, and then talking about marriage, things like that. And he was like, well, I do like you, but I won't be able to marry you because you're Black. I was like, oh. I said, aren't we Muslim? I don't understand what that has to do with anything. And that's when I started learning more about how people perceive other Muslims within our own community. And I experienced more. I had a really good friend in college. She was from Pakistan. Like, we were really great friends. I remember the first time I met her, she gave me this big smile, and I was at this new school, I didn't know anybody there, and kids like that became really good friends. And I would go to her house and, you know, spend the night, things like that. And, you know, one day her mom just referred to me in this name, this term. I didn't know what it meant. But my friend told me, and I was like, what? And I was just so, like, it was a derogatory word for a Black person. And like, she just was always so nice to me and hospitable. I didn't understand. I was like, what did I do? And I was like, what's wrong with me? Like, why are people like viewing me this type of way? Do I need to go try to bleach my skin, or should I try to get plastic surgery and get my nose thinner? Like, what's going on? And it really opened my eyes to that there is Muslims that are racist. And I experienced things with my Arab brothers and sisters. And I'm not saying everyone's like that, because everyone is not like that, for sure. But these are my experiences. And then I experienced some of the same thing when I was getting married, through that phase of my life with people here in Northern Virginia. So it's just like, we have a lot of work to do. And a lot of them, they say it because of their parents say no, or their elders, and need someone from their culture to understand their culture. We can learn. That's, you know, we can be educated. You shouldn't, I mean, if you like someone or love someone, it doesn't matter what their background is or their race is. It shouldn't matter. So I've had these conversations with my friends that are different backgrounds of me than me, and they say, no, I want our kids to do better. We did talk to the kids about this type of things, and, you know, they talk to their parents sometimes as well. And even within South Asian communities or other communities, if you're darker than someone else, you still face type of things as well. So it's just like, the darker skins is always seen to be lesser than someone who is lighter. And it's disgusting. It literally is disgusting. So I think that my generation, the millennials, and then the Generation Z, like, I feel like we have the power to really change what is happening and how people are thinking. Because we're also starting to have children too, or had children, and we're teaching them as well. And we're in a country right now where it's a very intense racial climate, with messages that are being betrayed through politics, things that are happening to people of color and Black people specifically. And, you know, it's a really intense time, but I always have faith in things. And like I said, it's moving me to see all these protests across the world. People don't have nothing to do with America or George Floyd. There are people doing it in UK and other countries and different continents, just working, like, really doing these protests. I think there could be change, but I'm not holding my breath. So.
Wow, thank you. As I mentioned, my racist experiences have mostly happened in Jewish spaces, and I wish I could tell you the times that I was brave and made a racist person see their wrongs. And it's not me all the time. I want people around me to feel warm and gooey and safe, and that's why I want to be a rabbi. And that also means, to my detriment, that I shut down when someone says something uncomfortable. And on top of that, I found that my experience with white Jews, many of whom consider social justice to be a real pinnacle of their religion, they fail to see that there's room to grow and to learn within themselves. You don't have to wear a white hood and be a member of the KKK anymore to say something racially charged. Like, many people can. And it's frustrating how these people calling for justice, my clergy role models and social justice heroes, many of them have directly to me or my Jew of color friends, they've been hurtful and inconsiderate. So what I like to do instead is I surround myself with people who are ready to help translate to the white offender, like, how what they said was offensive. When I do have the strength, I will push back and I'll say, why did you say that? Or would you say that to a white Jew? And then then I face the problem of becoming the angry Black woman in the situation. It feels like there's really no win. So instead, I surround myself with these trusted white friends who understand how the person's words were offensive and how commenting on my skin tone or any other very uncomfortable comment that they made was inappropriate. It reminds me when I worked with Jewish teens, I reminded them of the importance of being upstanders. So like now in school, when kids learn about bullying, they learn to not stand idly by, to not just sit there and watch bullying happen. Instead, you should say something if you see someone being hurt. And that's really what I think I can ask for white Jews and what I need. And these people that I surround myself are aware of the historical legacy of oppression and how it plays out in everyday life. And in the Jewish community, it would be so helpful, I think, if more Jews were educated on microaggressions and could have the tools to defend Black people in their spaces and make these communities a place that I don't have to leave in tears or I don't have to shut down, especially as a leader. Institutional change needs to happen through trainings and other ways and learning to make the community better. It says in our text, like, it is not incumbent upon you to complete the work, but neither are you at liberty to detest from it.
Thank you. That was beautiful. I think, you know, for me, like, I understand this a little bit differently. I remember that prophets or messengers were sent to a people that needed them the most. So the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was sent to Arabia and Saudi Arabia because that society needed him the most. It was a time of, you know, abhorrent ignorance where they were burying girls alive, where there was slavery. There were all of these things that were absolutely horrific, and he came to change that in the society. So I look at his approach, I look at, you know, what he did to, you know, ensure that these former slaves were elevated in the faith and were outworldly noticed and recognized as people that led the faith. And I'm not talking only about like Bilal, right? Even the stories of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ's mother who nursed him. There was a time in Arabia where a lot of women that were pregnant and had given birth, a job for them would be to nurse others. It was a prestigious thing, actually, to say that I've given my child to another woman to nurse, because when he went to go nurse with another woman, when your child goes to nurse with another woman, they learn a lot about different cultures, experiences. They're brought up in different ways. You know, that nursing mom could offer him a lot more than just having one single mother. So I like to think of these stories, and they're the stories that ground my understanding of the role that Black Muslims play. And I think it's so important as a Black Muslim to understand these stories and go into the faith. So for those that are converting to Islam, I hear them oftentimes say, you know, I'm so glad I learned about Islam before I met the Muslims, which is really, really sad, because the Muslims are disgustingly racist. You know, like Khadijah said, for me to begin talking about these experiences, I wouldn't even understand. And there's some stories of some Muslims that have joined the faith that have left the faith. And I'm pretty sure it can be said about other faiths, because they're just like, this is really, I'm unable to differentiate between faith and Muslim culture. Why is it so, you know, saliently racist, right? I'm also thinking of the story of, you know, Hajar, right? And how we get the commemoration of the experience in Hajj, where you go between one mountain, the Safa and Marwa. Hajar was a Black woman. So this is a paramount activity that Muslims partake in every single year. Millions of Muslims. This is the first time we've seen Muslims not be able to go to Saudi Arabia for Hajj, but they're commemorating. They're commemorating what a Black woman did, going from one mountain to another, waiting and looking for water, and then finally finding the water and tell it in the Arabic, in her African tongue, zummi, zummi, which means stop, stop. And that's how it's called Zamzam. So I'm thinking about all these stories, and this is, I just get, and there's so many stories. The woman who founded the institution of higher learning in Islam was an African woman from Morocco. There's so many stories in our faith that should highlight and make and allow anyone practicing or holding on to the name of Islam, and make them aware that this is not how we treat Muslims. My experiences in the Muslim community have been plenty, and like the rabbi said, or rabbi in training, Kelly, you know, I like for people to feel gooey. I like for people to feel, you know, calm and happy. And sometimes I'm not fully aware, because I'm not fully aware of what my existence in that space is like. I had I had a Desi, I belong to a predominantly Desi masjid, and I love my masjid. I had a lady 2 years back. We just finished a halaqah during the month of Ramadan, and we were exiting the mosque. And then she said, can I talk to you? And I said, yes. And she said, why are you trying to divide the community? And I said, what do you mean try to divide the community? And she said, you have your own halaqah, while the mosque has their own halaqah, and your halaqah is predominantly Black girls, and we already have one. And I was thinking, this was never the intention. I have previously, the other halaqah, the members that were Africans or African Americans, they didn't come to the halaqah. Maybe they didn't feel safe. I mean, I remember looking at the halaqah in itself and thinking, like, I don't feel like I belong here. There was one Black girl, and I just didn't want to be in that kind of space. So if this is the result that people are now attending my halaqah, and it's not just Black girls, but brown girls too. And it's so amazing because now that same halaqah, the one that's founded by the mosque, is now being run by a little Black girl because we decided to merge, because I don't want to be a part of something that divides people. I want people to be united. There have been so much in our faith. I think, like, in Muslim community, and what I've experienced is, like, there is this natural distrust of your scholarship, right? And of your leadership. It's like, as a Black person, can I not know what, can I not have this scholarship and present it, and you be okay with it the same as anybody else, right? When it comes to, like, marriage and everything, like there, it's everywhere. I had a neighbor once, a long time ago tell her daughter, don't play with Remaz, because she's like the mechanic's rag, and you're the satin cloth that women wear to sleep. And the more that you play with her, she'll rub the mechanic cloth dirt onto you, and you're going to be dirty. And this is not an experience, this kind of like derogatory terms and regard. I'm not the only person who's experienced this. I know I'm gonna talk about this later, but I wrote this post, and I've had people from all over the world write me their experiences in the Muslim community about racism they've experienced. I'm grateful that they aren't my own, but they really hurt. I had one man write me, and he said he entered a mosque and one of the brothers came and asked him to leave, and he said, this is an Arab only masjid. I had another woman write me and say, she was at a Desi, she entered a mosque, she's a recent convert, she walked into the mosque, nobody would look at her during Ramadan, nobody offered her any food, nobody offered her any dates, nobody stood next to her in prayer, and she said, I felt so disgusted, I said, what's wrong with me? And I had to leave. I had another story of a girl, Pakistani girl, who grew up in Saudi Arabia, and a lot of the immigrant communities are clustered together in Pakistan, in Saudi Arabia. So she became friends with a woman from Nigeria, and her parents really hated the fact that she was friends with a dark-skinned woman and accused her of being in an LGBTQI relationship. Because how can you, as a non-Black woman, be friends with a Black woman? So the stories are plenty, and the stories are many, and the stories are hurtful. But that's why I started this out by explaining how Islam truly regards Black people, how Islam is founded by Black people, how the history of our monotheistic religions and traditions were founded by Black people. So it's important for me to go back into that and remind those in my community about those stories and those narratives, and allow for them to understand that.
Thank you, ladies. Wow, powerful stories. And I know you guys are just like, shaving the top of the ice cream tub in terms of what actually you have experienced. And there's so much, but, being vulnerable and saying these stories of your experiences actually allows our listeners and people who are viewing on Facebook and on Zoom to really understand what it is you're going through. When you put your own life stories on the line and you say, this is what I've experienced, this is what I've seen, this is what I have to go through, people are going to be able to relate to that, right? We can, yes, absolutely, Remaz, we can look at the history of Islam and what our Prophet ﷺ taught us and what it says in the Quran. But again, people think that just because they're Muslim, they're not racist. Like, oh yeah, I mean, I'm not racist, I'm not killing them. That's what they say. And I'll tell you that from my background. Right? I grew up in an Afghan family. We came to the United States after the Russian invasion. And I remember I was a teenager and this one girl in the community wanted to marry a Black guy and they all like threw a fit. The things I would hear, like, you know, in Farsi, they would say like, marda ki siyas, kada zuchi mikna, nomar kharab mikna, ira boyad mo bugim nature ki kolegi digomana mikna. Like, no, she cannot marry this black guy. He's black. Like, how could you do this? How could you ruin our name? What are people going to say? How can we, you know, lift our heads? What are her children going to look like? How are we going to get through this? There was so much nonsense around that one incident that it really disgusted me, right? And these things happen in Afghan families, in the culture, in Desi culture, and within Arab culture, within all cultures. But we got to say it like it is. Like, if we brush it under the rug and be like, no, it doesn't happen, you're perpetuating that cycle. We need to let our community members know that these types of things are racist. And when you say these things, it puts you in that camp. So think twice before you say something and change the way you're thinking, because obviously you don't understand where you're supposed to be in this game. You know, and I mean, Khadija, you're talking about meeting this guy in college, and I had to like chuckle under my breath when you said that he wanted to halal date, but he didn't want to marry you. Like, how does that work? I'm still trying to figure that out. Where exactly were we in that whole equation? And you know, and you had talked about this on your, you wrote about this on your Facebook post about this interaction with, well, you know, Muslim men who wanted to have a certain relationship with you, but they would never, you know, stand up to their family and saying that, you know, you're the person that they want to marry, and regardless of your skin color, that's something that they should have stood upon, and the grounds that they should have gone forward with it, but because their family wasn't going to say yes. I want to know from you, Khadija, like, what is your message, you know, to people who have hurt the people from the Black community with their words and their ideas and their sentiments, because this needs to be said, and I don't want you sugarcoating it, because we're not here to sugarcoat anything. We're beyond sugarcoating. People need to hear, and it's important for them to hear. And when it comes from us being allies in this front, we need to be able to give you the space to do it, and that's what I want. So I want you to be open and honest about everything, and just lay it out like it is.
So I will say, I'm not the one to sugarcoat. I'm very direct. I've come to that point in my life where this is where I am. So I see all the time people posting what Martin Luther King said or Malcolm X said on their Facebook pages that are like non-Black and think they're done. No, you're not done. So you post to have a feel-good moment, put about a quote from MLK, Malcolm X, you're not done. There's work to do. You people from your community have hurt people that are Black. And I say people of color, people that are Black. We're focusing on Black folks right now. People that are Black. And it's a continuing cycle. And it needs to end. It needs to stop, period. So people have asked me, what can they do to stop racism? How can they start these conversations? And like, literally, it's not my job to tell you how to do that, because we've been telling you for years. However, I'm willing to provide some tips, because I think it's important. I've had friends that messaged me privately. As Remaz said, people, when I shared that post, people were messaging me privately saying, you know, it happened to me too. You know, you know, especially going even overseas in other countries as well, being a Black person, going into masjids. Some girl told me, woman said she left the faith. Like we mentioned, she left the faith. She was a Muslim. She left Islam because of her racial experiences. And then she said to me, she's thinking about coming back. And that really, that was a moment for me right there. And we've been talking for the last couple of days. And like, people don't talk about this as openly, but people know it's happening. And I think, and there are a lot of, I think that people need to take steps to end this. You can't just talk about it, be outraged on Facebook. You gotta do it in real life too. You have to do it in real life. And I think one of the things is talking to your elders, that's for sure. But I think people are afraid of being disrespectful. But being racist is disrespectful. It is. So there can be a way to address it. It should be addressed. I mean, our elders are ingrained in their ways. My mom, she's ingrained in her ways and different things. So it can be hard to change people's mindset, but it starts with you. And there are so many organizations that are in the Muslim space that are fighting and dismantling racism. Reach out to them. I can name several. Actually, I'll just name a few right now so people can know about them. But, and even talking to a Black Muslim, reach out to Black Muslims, ask them, don't talk for us, listen, to us. We know what we experience. You don't know. And don't try to, if we're sharing our experience, don't come and say, well, you know, it's happened to me. It's not about you. Stop gaslighting. It's not about you right now. This is our times. We're sharing our experiences. Don't try to negate our experiences. Don't try to say this and that, because that's a form of gaslighting. That's a form of acting like that what we have to say is not important. People tried to silence us for years. We are tired of being silent. We are out in these streets. We are protesting. We're tired of being killed in these streets. I'm just gonna keep it real. So like I was saying, some orgs you can talk to reach out to. I think that faith groups, Muslim, Christian, Jewish, Hindu, so on and so forth, should come together and form a coalition to address this in faith space and faith spaces. And in the Muslim community, you can talk to orgs like Muslim Arc. They focus on addressing racism in the Muslim community. You can talk to Muslim Wellness Foundation, Black Muslim Psychology. So speaking of Black Muslim Psychology, they have a conference every year. Now we have these big ones like ICNA and ISNA, but we started our own because we don't feel welcome in these spaces. You know, if you look at the programming, maybe it's changed now, but a lot of things that people in the rosters are not Black people. We submitted our proposals, our abstracts to do sessions, a lot of them get denied. You need to amplify the voices of Black people if you're gonna say that we are included in this community, that we are a part of this community. Have us on these panels, sharing our Black experiences, amplify our Black voices. You are not portraying a bright picture of this ummah if you don't include us. We are part of this ummah. We're not going nowhere. We are here to stay. So have us on these panels, because we are leaving and starting our own conferences so we can have our own spaces, talk about our own issues, because you're not allowing that for us. But you're not going to silence us. We're going to do it ourselves. So people like organizations like ICNA, ISNA, other big mainstream organizations need to have Black voices at these conferences, speaking out and being the lineup speaker or the head speaker, not just, you know, having people of different backgrounds. And also, there's organizations like Sapelo Square. There's a lot of different writings from different Black Muslims sharing their experiences. There's Iman, Michigan. There's Mana, Muslim Alliance North America. There's a Black Dawah Network. There's Mash El Taco in Chicago. And there's people like Preacher Moss that are good people to reach out to. And I mean, I'll even talk. Like, I think it's important to let Black folks talk and people listen, because you can say everything in the world and you can be on your page outrage Black Lives Matter and doing your posts and all that, but how does that help us if you're not going to go and talk to people close to you that you see outright blatant racism happening and you remain quiet? You got to speak on it. So this is what I say: if we're hurting and if we're all one ummah, if one hurts, we all hurt, then let that be true. You stop us from hurting. You go out there and you stop the racism. It's not my job to do it for you. You need to go do it yourself. So that's what I have to say about that.
Thank you, Khadija, for listing all those organizations, and we'll have that posted up on our Sister Act Facebook page and the AMI website as well. So for anyone who wants to go back and see which organizations they can actually get in touch with. Thank you.
So Kelly, I wanted to take a few minutes with you, you alluded earlier to the fact that many or most of your experiences with racism have been within the Jewish community. You know, we want to talk a little bit about the idea of acceptance as a Black Jewish woman, and also as someone who is studying to become a rabbi, who's going to be a leader within the community. And I know we've had this conversation before. Kelly and I've had the privilege and blessing of spending time with her at our Reform Movements, both at youth events, but also at our Reform Movements regional summer camp for a number of years, and having some of these conversations, and actually even watching and witnessing witnessing you be an upstander, which I've definitely seen. I know that might not have always been the comfort zone, but I've seen you do that even with the leader of our Reform Movement and expressing your views. And so I'd love to hear from you as somebody who is going and is already a leader within our Reform Jewish community, what your expectations are of the Jewish community, suggestions on not only where we are now, but how can we show up for Jews of color? What can we do now? And what, I know there's that longer term process of work that needs to happen too, but what do you hope to see for the long term?
Yeah, as Khadijah was talking, a lot of those experiences resonated with me. I know people who have left Judaism because of terrible experiences that they've faced as a person of color, and I think we need to take care of our kahila, our full community. And I need white Jews to stop telling me and other Jews of color that they know how I feel, because they don't. Again, I'm not in a place emotionally where I can list off the names of, not names, but hurtful instances or other times when I've been asked to speak for all of Black people. And even there's a time before I started rabbinical school and during, where I'm not sure if I'm on the right path because of these racist experiences that I faced and what I've heard from my classmates of color. Like I don't always know that my progressive institution, my very progressive institution, is ready for someone like me. And then I also see that there's room to grow. I think that the Jewish community needs to find simultaneously the balance of raising up voices of Jews of color and also treating them with dignity, knowing that we are exhausted, paying them for their services and making sure that their needs are met, while at the same time not making them feel othered. It's this hard dichotomy where we need to avoid tokenization and also lift up their voices and make sure that it's not only white faces that we're seeing. I think we need more than social media posts. I think we need to support Black-owned businesses in our community and support those relationships there. I think we need to, as Jews, use our power and lobby institutions to defund the police and to please stop hiring armed guards in front of our synagogue. Every time you do that, it's to make the white people feel more comfortable, when in reality it's saying, we don't want Black people here. We can donate to GoFundMes and support other nonprofits within the community that help people of color. I think white Jews, it would be helpful if we stop demonizing anger and violence that is happening and know the facts and unlearn that systematic racism is based in the history of our culture for centuries since Black people landed on our shores. There's this image of the angry Black person that's upsetting you when you see pictures of these riots. This is because of centuries of discrimination and internalized racism that really needs to be changed. And even if it's not your way and what you're used to, this change is essential. I also find that Jews love to lift up our role in the civil rights movement. And rightfully, I think it was a moment of pride. And also I think we need to know that not every Jew in America in the 1960s supported the civil rights movement. And just because we had this relationship in the past doesn't mean that you're off the hook for today. You can't say, oh, we helped draft the civil rights bill, when it's, the realities of today, I think, speak for itself. I think Rabbi Sandra Lawson, who is a Black rabbi who I admire, she says it best. She says, being anti-racist requires working every day, either emotionally or physically, to dismantle the racism that we've all been taught since day one in the US. This isn't going to be fixed overnight or fade away. We can share resources and recommended readings and Instagram posts, but are you doing the work? Are you reading these books that you're sharing about? Are you listening to these podcasts? Are you doing this cheshbon nefesh? We have it in Judaism. It's kind of repairing looking at your soul. Where have you messed up? And know that it's okay to mess up. Everybody messes up. Black people mess up, and still learn from your mistakes and know that you can do better.
Sorry, my phone is ringing here. I can't quite stop it. Vanessa, do you want to take the next question?
I did the mistake I was telling that we normally always do, is I start talking when we're muted. This is the Zoom life now that we have to get used to. But thank you so much for that, Kelly, and Khadijah, for your comments. A lot to think about. So Remaz, as an Arab Black young lady, you just talked about racism within the Arab community, and you have received a lot of slack from Arabs on social media, and a lot of them you've actually posted on social media, like you took snapshots and you put it up there. Like, what was your thought process when you were doing that? And can you like kind of walk through that whole incident of people countering your narrative on social media when you're telling them about the racism, and then Arabs coming back at you and saying, well, you know, you're a sellout, or you're speaking up against us, how can you, we're not racist, blah blah blah, and now you have to defend it even more.
Okay. First of all, that was a very uncomfortable post to write up, because like Kelly mentioned earlier, I'm not used to doing that. However, I noticed the deafening silence of, you know, all the communities surrounding me, and I was just so upset at how you couldn't be so angry at the very beginning of by what's going on. You know, I thought about it, and I think like whenever there's anything like the Palestinian community or anything regarding the Muslim ban or anything, any issue, any social justice issue concerning white Arabs, like everybody's out in the streets. Like my activism started based on, you know, what was going on in Palestine. Like I remember I would write poetry and I would cry for weeks, and my dad had this one Palestinian friend was like, oh, you can read your poetry to him, like if it makes you feel better. So like I just couldn't understand that we were collectively always, like the Black community was always enraged and was always in support of all these causes, but there was like this deafening silence by people that I called friends. It started out by me sending a message to a social media influencer with a pretty large following, like over 200,000 likes. And I said, hey, I haven't seen you post about this issue. And she shared with me that she was consulting affected communities and trying to get the language, the right language. But to me, I mean, I like her, she's my friend, we're cool. But to me, it's like, you shouldn't have to consult affected communities. Like you should be so enraged right away and you should post something. It could be as simple as a photo and a caption as Black Lives Matter. And then maybe you can take the day or two, because your audience and a lot of these people that are looking at you are looking for that messaging. So to me, ultimately, that was just another instance in which I realized that Black people don't matter as much to other people. Like we're not at the very forefront of issues that other people are concerned with. We're an afterthought. So I was like, you know what? I have my own platform and I'm just gonna speak my truth because I am angry. That's how I was. I'm very angry, still am very angry. So I wrote a post mainly talking about the implicit biases that are formed when we carelessly use words such as abid and abd. I've had that word used with me, people everywhere. I've had that word used with me when I was in Mecca. When I was performing Hajj, someone called me that. The most holiest and sanctity of place is a place where I felt like I was violated for my identity. The responses have been varying. A lot of the hate I feel like comes from the discomfort that one feels when you challenge the entirety of their life. You know what I'm saying? Because I was asking them to look inwards and know that whenever you use these words as abid and abd and things of that nature, those words carry a lot, because slavery and a slave is synonymous with servitude. A slave is synonymous with one that isn't worthy of life, of love, of kindness, of anything. So ultimately, this is someone that does not matter. And like we learn a lot from like my education in school, that like the stages of genocide are varying. Like the actual physical taking of life is one of the last stages before the denial stage. So there's a lot that occurs that dehumanizes the person. So when you use this word abid and abd, you're constantly dehumanizing us, and you're allowing for the entire Muslim world that don't regard us to continue in their disregard for us. So the responses were very vile, very vile. I had one girl wrote me back, actually multiple. There was a thread, maybe 6 or 7, that wrote me back and said, your anger is unfounded. You're just upset that Abdullah left you for Fatima. And by this, they're implying that, it's really disgusting to be honest, but they're implying that I was talking to some white Arab guy and this Fatima comes and who's a white Arab and steals him away from me. And that to me is, imagine had that been my actual experience. Imagine I've had that as part of my experience in life. You know, I haven't, you know, yeah, but like that hasn't been part of my experience, talking to a white Arab guy and him being stolen, you know, by a white Arab girl. But I'm pretty sure that is the experience of hundreds of thousands of women that live in predominantly white Arab spaces. People called me all sorts of names, people cussed me out, but what I like to focus on is the admission of the reality that, yes, these are words we're using in our homes, and I have never thought about it before. I can't believe that you're right, 100%. Using these words allows for me to disregard people. Using this word, although may not lead to the physical slain body, but in a way I'm perpetuating the continuance of this discrimination in our society and in our homes. So it's been, you know, it's been varying responses. There have been more positive than negative, at least in my eyes, because I don't choose to engage. Like Khadija said, you're not responsible for teaching people. I'm simply putting out my truth, and this is a true message. So if it makes you, if your discomfort moves you towards recognizing your faulty behavior and your discriminatory thinking and changing, then that so be it. If it does not, and you're further doing, you're trying to defend your image or your people, because people were upset. They said, you know, you're trying to defame Islam. We already get so much hate for being Muslims. By talking about the racism in our Muslim community, you're making people think that Islam is hateful. I'm saying no. I'm talking about you guys and what you're doing. This is not Islam, because this is what Islam tells us, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us, and He says, if you see an injustice, change it with your hand. Change it with your physical body. And if you see an injustice and you cannot change it with your physical body, then change it with your tongue. Speak your truth. And if you cannot, then hate it with your heart. And to hate it with your heart is the least of faith. To hate it with your heart is least of faith. So what I'm trying to do, and what I feel like a lot of my Black brothers and sisters are trying to get people to hate it with their heart, which is the weakest of faith. So here you're telling me about Islam and how making Islam look bad, but you're not even hating this with your heart. So it's very frustrating, but at the same time, it's been beautiful to see people say, look, I now hate it with my heart. You've awoken me to hate it with my heart, and I will now vocally speak about it. And God willing, I'm going to now act about it. And that's the only thing we can do, is to act about it.
Thank you, Remaz. That leads us really beautifully into our final question, which is that it's not enough anymore for those of us who are white to say, I am not a racist. That's too passive. But we have to be anti-racist. We have to stand up. We have to be upstanders. As Kelly said, we have to stand up and advocate for our Black brothers and sisters. And so sort of the big $1 million question, or the answer I think that we all seek, is what can places of worship, mosques, churches, synagogues, temples, etc., what can we do to educate people on the plight of the Black community in this country for more than for the past 400 years, and do more than just post that they have the book or that it's on their reading list, as Kelly mentioned, but do more with that, not just educate themselves, but also to recognize that their silence is part of the problem. And so, Remaz, let's start with you.
I think I'll speak directly to what masjids should do and what mosques should do. I think that when you understand the history of a people, you will care a lot more than them. What I've seen now is that people don't know about African Americans. A lot of the immigrants that come in here, like, they don't know that, you know, 1/3 of the Muslim population in America are African Americans. I'm pretty sure they don't even know that the the slaves that were brought to America were Muslim. That it was probably a dua, that is a prayer that a slave made, oh Allah, make from my progeny those that are Muslim, that has allowed this country to have Islam. So I think first and foremost, and my thing is, it's all about education, right? Learn about the history of African American Muslims in this nation, and how their fight and their plight is what allows for you today to be unapologetically Muslim. It is a direct result from what they've done. And for all the immigrant communities, understand that your physical presence in this country is once more a direct result of the civil rights movement and the fight that was led by African Americans in which they died. The 1965 Immigration Act, which diversified the quota and allowed for people from non-Western hemisphere the opportunity to migrate and come to this country, is a direct result from African American fight. So when you now exist in this country and say, look, as an immigrant, I am here because African Americans fought for me, you'll feel indebted. If I gave you a kidney, you will go to your grave respecting me. You will go to your grave remembering the kindness that I've showed onto you. So we should remember that. I'm sorry that this is what it comes down to, right? Because, as Muslims, we're not supposed to hold what people have done for us over their heads. But unfortunately, I'm letting the people know. This is what African Americans have done for us, right? So as immigrants, like your ability to seek education, your ability to go to these Ivy League schools, graduate with the highest degree while wearing your hijab, working as a neurosurgeon, making all this money, or even opening up a corner store in the Black community, all of these things come from the fight that was led to us by African Americans. So my message to the Muslim community, because that's the one that I can address, is don't silence Black voices first and foremost. In the Black community, there's a plethora of knowledge, of brilliance, of scholarship. If you want people to talk about issues, invite them out. For these same institutions, make sure you have a Black imam. Like shout out to Hernessa's Masjid, Adam Center, which is led by Imam Majid, a Sudanese imam, or even if you're trying to, retain a counselor into your masajid, make sure she's African American. There's so many ways in which we can center Black voices, because this is the way, this is how we're supposed to go forward, right? This is a big machine. White supremacy is a big machine. It's a huge institution, and it's a cycle that's going to continuously be perpetuated. And the only way that we can address this is by collectively acting and not being pawns to white supremacy. So I would say look inward first and foremost, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us and He says, لا يغير الله ما في قوم حتى يغيروا ما في أنفسهم. Allah, God, will not change what's within a society until they change what's within themselves. So look inwards, look at your own institutions, look at your own families, begin to incorporate these Black voices, and teach your community where their right as immigrants come from and where their right to be unapologetically Muslim comes from.
Thank you. Khadija, everyone's giving snaps. Khadija, do you want to add anything to what Remaz is sharing?
She said it very well, and I mentioned some things a little bit earlier. But also keep in mind that we love being Black. You're not going to change because you don't like us. I love being Black. And I will be Black today that I die. And it's good that you might have Black imams, but sometimes you need more than that. We need to have workshops, or you need to have, in your khutbahs or your sermons, talk about racism, call your community out. Have people in your executive leadership that are Black. Have these conversations, especially with your elderly population that have these mindsets that are so outdated that shouldn't even be dated. Have conversations. My parents were a part of the civil rights movement. They marched in the streets. They were around, Malcolm X was around, MLK. So I was raised reading about Malcolm X, learning about my history and being proud of my history. And now my generation's out here in the streets protesting again. It's like a continuous cycle. It's not funny at all. So I think that you need to have this in your space, especially if your masjid is predominantly non-Black. You need to bring in Black people. Let us feel welcome. Like we said before, all of us leave masjids where you don't feel welcome in because, just because we're Black. So I think, and also, have us at these big conferences or, have us on these leadership roles. Stop trying to silence us, especially being Black and a woman and Muslim. And sometimes you go to Muslim organizations, you experience things like this too, like businesses, and you experience these things too working from Muslim organizations. So it's so many places we have to tackle and look at and dismantle this racism. And it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of sweat and a lot of effort. But I think that if people actually take that first step and hate it in their hearts and then with their tongues and then get into action, I think that it could make a difference. And like I mentioned a bunch of orgs earlier on in this call, reach out to these organizations. They do trainings, they do workshops, they do some, like Muslim Art does racism 101, a basic workshop for you to learn about what's going on about racism. Some people don't even know they're racist, and that's sad. Like, so I think that those are the main things you need to do. And again, I love being Black, so.
Thank you. And Kelly, as you answer that, I want to thank you again and acknowledge that it's after 11:15 in Jerusalem. So we really appreciate your staying on with us so late. And this is such an important conversation. And again, I know it's one that we want to continue beyond this time tonight. But again, Kelly, thank you.
It's okay. I would have been in class right now, and my teacher who was watching before, who had to leave to teach class, said it was okay. Honestly, everything that these women said applies to the Jewish community. I think when we're having these conversations with people in white communities, we're not calling you out. We're not saying that you're racist and there's no going back. Like, we're calling you in. We want to be respected, and we want to be heard, and we want to be understood. I think it's important for Jews also to understand the history of how Black people built America and their legacy that plays on within the Jewish community, especially after Jews became white after World War II, more specifically. Individual communities have been a part of racial injustice within our own community, from owning slaves in the South, a complex involvement in the civil rights movement, domesticated house workers, economic equality, and just countless times where abuse of power has really hit home. And as Jews also, we learn a lot about generational trauma, and we talk about how being oppressed in our past as Jews like lives on today in our heritage, in our holidays, in the way we speak. And I think we can hold that, and at the same time know that we have Black members of our community who are experiencing trauma right now to this day, and to make sure that they feel that they can belong in these communities. And when I say that remove police officers from the front doors of our synagogues, we're not saying that that we're going to let anti-Semites in. Like, there's a way for us to protect against outside hate while also taking care of our own community. So read Kendi, read Coates. There's plenty of resources that are shared. I know specifically from the Union of Reform Judaism, their Audacious Hospitality team is out there sharing resources, specifically things written by Chris Harrison and other Jews of color who I admire. They're out there. There are resources. And if you need more direction, you can ask a white ally that you trust. If let the Jew of color volunteer that information at the same time. Because I'm here today doesn't mean I speak for every Black Jew, and it's not only on us to do the work, it's on every single person in this community, specifically the white community, to unlearn this this deep legacy of America. And also it's on everyone to protect the Jews of color, and all Jews and all people of color, I mean.
Thank you, Kelly and Khadija and Remaz. I wish we had more time to keep talking, because I think this is a conversation that could go on and on and on. But you guys hit on a lot of great issues and a lot of great things that we're going through within your life, and things that people needed to hear. So I want to thank you all for coming. We did have a lot of questions, but a lot of it you guys answered throughout your talk. So that was great. Remaz, can you take a minute and just kind of define Abd and Abdi for our listeners? Because I know you did in the beginning, but if you really want to emphasize how degrading it is, so that our listeners can understand what that actually implies.
So it means slave, like that is the actual meaning of it, a slave. And it's also an attribute like of God, like of us to God, right? We're Abidullah, we're servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's really interesting when people use that word instead of, you know, highlighting the servitude that we are towards God, because we're all slaves of God, but using it specifically in its derogatory form towards people of color, saying that you're of service to us. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. That they're taking something that is implied for our relationship with God and using it to make it a relationship between human beings based on color. And that's something that's been perpetual. So for some of our listeners, we're asking what that meant, and I wanted you to kind of hit on that. We did, like I said, we had a couple of other questions that you guys, were so good and you actually hit it without me having to ask it. But there was one question where one of the listeners was asking about their sister working in a school, and it's a predominantly minority school, but all the leadership is white. And because the students pushed, they finally put out a statement against racism, which they maybe did not want to do, but because the students pushed it. How do you think organizations, schools, institutions can incorporate training for their employees, for their board members, for their teachers, their staff, without the struggle? Is there even a way? Like how do they come to grips with actually getting to that point where that shouldn't even be a no-brainer? It's open to any one of you. Anybody wants to answer that or hit that question, please go ahead. The floor is all yours.
I actually have a teacher friend that I saw her Facebook post about this, actually, something similar. And they always turn to her to be the person to speak about race because she's Black, so token Black person. So when they asked her this time in regards with the whole with the George Floyd and all the people and the excitement and their rage, she said, no, I'm not doing it this time. And what she had them do was she had the white teachers sit down and write down what they thought were ways they could address racism themselves. So we didn't teach them. They're sitting down writing down their own thoughts and they're discussing it with each other. And I think it's important that people actually think for themselves instead of us telling them what to do. So with her school, I mean, it's sad they don't want to do it, but they need to do it. That's the bottom line. And I think that they need to have, when they have orientation, especially if they have a lot of children of color in their school, they need to be able to cater to these children. And then even having non-children of color, they need to know how to not be racist if the parents are teaching them at home. So I think they need to have these discussions, even if they don't want to have it because it's important. And if they think all lives matter, they need to have these conversations. So I think that having the teachers discuss it amongst themselves, how, and then bringing in someone who can actually do a training that knows how is from the community can be very, very important. But I mean, I don't really have any other advice than that, but I think her boss, who's on the call, I see, needs to really bring in people, needs to actually address this topic, because it's 2020, and you're gonna have people of all backgrounds in your school, and all of them should be welcome in your school. You have to address these topics.
If I can just add a bit to it, like it's important for us to recognize that implicit biases exist. No, they're constructed over years and years and years and years. In fact, I heard from one of my African American sisters yesterday, and she told me that she's currently collecting stories from white women and how they've either perpetuated, these discriminations and or have stood against it. And one of the white ladies that she's been speaking to told her that I have stopped teaching. I don't teach in schools as a white woman. Why? Because growing up, I was in the classroom and there was one kid, let's call him Tyrone. Tyrone was always acting up and my teacher always punished him. And to me, I always understood that Tyrone acting up and my teacher punishing him, meaning Black kids are bad. So she grew up with that understanding, and even in her own, she admitted this, even in her own teachings, she's finding that she has a preference for white kids than Black kids. So implicit biases are real. They take many, many, many years to deconstruct. But I think just like we make these trainings mandatory in other agencies, for example, I know TSA, after all the discriminations and all the profiling, they now have a mandated training. I think they take it either like annually, if not monthly. We need something like this. It needs to be founded by the Department of Education, where if you're going to operate as an institution of higher learning or an institution of learning, you need to make sure that your teachers take this training. And if it's a private institution, I would further say, and ask the parents involved to take a watered down version to their kids, have these activities, and that can help them have these conversations at home. That way their children can come into the institutions and are not perpetuating racism as well.
Kelly, do you want to add to that?
No, that was very well said.
Okay. So again, I want to thank you ladies for coming on behalf of Rabbi Susan, myself, everyone at the American Muslim Institution. This was an amazing conversation. And again, it's not the end. We have a lot of work to do, and know that as allies in this walk is again, what all of you have said, is to allow you guys to speak and for us to listen. And that's one of the best ways I think we can get this message across, is for people to hear your stories. And that's what we're hoping to do. If you'd like to take a couple of seconds to do a closing remarks, you're more than welcome to before we sign off. If any of you would like to say something. Rabbi Susan, you want to end it?
I just want to give them a moment in case anyone was getting ready to unmute.
Absolutely.
And it's okay. You all were incredible. Oh, Remaz, go ahead.
One ayah I would like to share from the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in chapter 4, verse 135, "O you who have believed, be persistently standing firm in justice, witnesses for Allah, even it be against yourselves or parents and relatives. Whether one is rich or poor, Allah is more worthy of both. So follow not personal inclination, lest you not be just. And if you distort your testimony or refuse to give it, then indeed Allah is ever with what you do acquainted." I just wanted to share that verse from the Quran as a reminder to the Muslims listening that you can stand up against your own families, your relatives, and yourself when there is discrimination and you need to be just.
Yeah, and I think that's a beautiful way to end this. And I'm going to hand it off to Rabbi Susan to close out the session. Again, I want to thank you ladies so much for coming. I'm so glad to have you guys in my life. And I just met Kelly now. And again, thank you for staying up in Jerusalem and having this conversation with us. Love it that we have our first international panelist on our show. I would love to have all of you guys come back for another session sometime soon. Rabbi Susan.
And it would be great to have an opportunity to follow up as we continue this journey together. In the very beginning of our Torah, the Jewish Torah, at the beginning of our Jewish Bible, the Tanakh, in the book of Genesis, we are told that God created human beings, B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God. And one of the things that I was raised knowing and learning and seeing, and I think is important for all of us to remember and recognize, is that God is not any one color. That the beauty of God is what exists in the faces and the colors and hues of the people who surround us. That's when we're taught that we're created B'Tselem Elohim in the image of God, it means that all of us together reflect that image of God, and we need to treat each other and love each other with that sense of the divine that is within each of us. And I think while we do have a lot of work to do, I think it's important for all of us to recognize that that we come to this as human beings first and foremost, and there's work to do in getting others to that place. But we see you, and we see the beauty that is within your skin. And Khadijah, I know you talked about this. You love being Black. I love who you are and how you look, and the essence of, most importantly, your neshama, your soul that's within each of you. And to be able to share this conversation and this dialogue, we feel incredibly blessed, and only if it's more than just talking. Because if talk is all we do, then we'll never get where we need to be. And so we all are looking forward to continuing the dialogue and the work and the journey together. And that promised land is out there. And I hope to God it doesn't take us 40 years as the Torah tells us. It's been 400 years. It's been longer than that, centuries. And we need to make the world that we need and the world that God needs and that God desires. We have the ability to make that world together. If we're all in it together and working to bring that world to fruition. So again, thank you for the blessing of your words, your presence, and having this connection and this friendship as we move forward.
Thank you, Rabbi Susan, for bringing in the Jewish perspective of this, and for Remaz for quoting one of the most awesomest ayahs of the Quran on justice and putting it out there for Muslims to think about. Again, our work continues. Thank you again, ladies, so much. Have a blessed day. We'll talk to you soon. Bye. Assalamu alaikum. Shalom.